Right, let's begin with the common saying that a friend in need is a friend indeed. Now, this resonates with a number of relationships that Nigeria has entered into with many countries, but more so with Australia. And the reason is simple. Australia is one of the few countries that identified with Nigeria in 1960, and that's, of course, when she needed allies the most. But this shouldn't come as a surprise because as one of the founding members of the multilateral organization, that's the United Nations, Australia has been a strong frontliner of regional and global initiatives to promote peace and democracy all around the world. So for half a century and a decade, Nigeria and Australia have kept their bilateral vows to each other. But there is much more that binds these two countries together. Common colonial heritage, common membership platforms at the UN and the Commonwealth, common cultural disposition, like, of course, traveling. You know, Nigerians like traveling a lot, touring sites, reading, of course, seeking knowledge. Now, take a closer look at those food items you probably bought from the malls or shops near you. Wheat, for instance, chances are that they could have come from Australia. But beyond what is going for both countries, trade balance between them, have been oscillating. That's in terms of numbers. Nigeria probably stands between a distant 40 and only recently 51 trading partner. And that's because Nigeria's major export to Australia is still crude oil. But regardless, for both countries, investment priorities are changing and there is need to explore deeper opportunities beyond crude oil and wheat, as well as other food items. And that's exactly what the countries have resolved to do, and they're not mumbling about it. So Late Edition this week is engaging the High Commissioners of both countries on these renewed diplomatic initiatives. I am Claire Adilabu Abdurrazak. Thank you for joining me. Ambassador Bello Husseini Kazaure was named the Nigerian High Commissioner to Australia, residing in Canberra in 2017, of course with concurrent accreditation to New Zealand, Fiji, Papua Guinea and Vanuatu. Having served as Charge d'Affaires ad interim, I hope I got that right, at the Embassy of Nigeria in Japan in 2016. That's, of course, where his responsibilities included encouraging Japanese business community to invest in Nigeria. He began his diplomat career at the Budget Department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, after completing the mandatory Foreign Service Academy in 1994. He served as a two-term protocol officer before he was posted to the High Commission of Nigeria in Harare, Zimbabwe, where he also, due to his hard work, he had double promotion from third secretary, second secretary, and the first secretary, respectively. Now, at the High Commission of Nigeria in New Delhi, Ambassador Bello Husseini Kazaure served as a counselor and later senior counselor in charge of consular and immigration issues at the mission. And of course, later he became head of the Chancery between 2003 and 2007. Ambassador Kazaure was also head of Chancery and Charge d'Affaires in Kuwait. He has undertaken multilateral assignments, including international trade mission, conflict resolution, and establishment of African Diplomatic Group. Now, my second guest, incidentally, my namesake, Claire Ireland, was named the Australian High Commissioner to Nigeria in June 2019 with a non-resident accreditation to Benin, Cameroon, Niger, Gabon, the Gambia, and ECOWAS. She is described as a very strategic, outcome-focused leader with over 2-decade experience working in Africa and other parts of the world. And her experience include a decade at the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Deputy Head of Mission in the UAE, Head of Economic and Development Cooperation in Vietnam, Senior Environment and Development Consultant Ideal Group, and this is the catch, Environment Advisor with DFID. Claire Ireland holds an MSc in Environment Technology and a BSc in Applied Environmental Resources Science from the University of Salford. She progressed from a technical environment specialist, leading high-level policy dialogues and brokering effective partnerships. Claire is known to have a knack for shaping strategic priorities, defining goals, and managing team resources to consistently deliver results. Your Excellencies, Claire and Ambassador Kazaure, thank you for joining me. Claire, you're smiling.
Oh, that sounded so nice. Thank you so much for that kind of summary of my career.
Let me welcome you. Of course, as we say here, Claire is my sister, you know, from another mother. And you're the first female ambassador.
I am. We've had 60 years of diplomatic relations, as you highlighted in your introduction.
That's quite striking. I doubt if you have escaped questions from newsmen to this effect. So I'm going to start on that note.
Excellent.
By asking you to give us a sense of understanding of Australia's disposition to gender inclusion, especially in governance, structure, with particular emphasis on such positions that you occupy.
Yeah, so actually the Australian government's really taken a proactive approach to gender integration and gender equality across the diplomatic service. 5 years ago, there were only 25% of female heads of mission. Now, there's 43%. The target is to achieve 50% to get gender parity. So we're not quite there yet, but it's certainly striving towards it. And setting targets has definitely been part of the role in the success of
what kind of policy is driving that? Legislation or is...
No, it's internal policy, but we've put targets. So there is a target that we have to reach 50%, and that's why we've seen this increase from 25% up to where we are now. And I think it's something like we've got 112 missions around the world, and only 13 missions now haven't had a female head of mission at some point. So it's been very proactive. We've had a couple of female ministers. Our foreign ministers are both female for the last 2 times. I think that's helped to drive the programme forward too. But it's certainly a real commitment by the Australian government, and we're seeing that come to fruition now. I think there's...
And you're happy about it?
Very much so. I mean, it's challenging, particularly, I have 3 children. I'm a mother. I've got a 14, 12 and 8-year-old. So juggling both kind of the senior role that I'm in and also a family can be tough at times. But I think it's also, I feel a real honour to be a role model to my daughters who see me doing this important role. So
I know it's a common practice in diplomatic service, to have a single diplomat, give a single diplomat dual responsibilities. You have, dual accreditation, So just explain to us how, again, you're resident in Nigeria, how are you able to juggle? You've just told us that you have 3 children and all that.
Yeah, I think my team often joke that I don't sleep much. I seem to cram a lot in, so I have to travel a lot. I mean, that is part of the job. So the week after next, I'm going to Cameroon, where I'll be presenting my credentials to the Cameroon government, but also Benin, Gabon, Niger, as you also highlighting the Gambia and ECOWAS are part of my responsibility too. But I've got a team, right? So it's not just me. I've got a team of 6 other Australians at the embassy, plus 15 locally engaged staff. So together we work to take that forward, the agenda. I have the privilege of being in that leadership role and having that oversight and strategic kind of vision direction for the team, but I couldn't do what I do without a strong team behind me who are doing the day-to-day kind of work in collaboration with our counterparts.
Just before I bring our ambassador in, again, let me explore the fact that, of course, you are the first female ambassador from Australia, to be named in Nigeria. To ask you, the common belief, ironically so, is that women who are into family, seriously into family, can hardly work effectively in very sensitive positions. But that doesn't seem to hold water, is it?
No, I think that's really true, and I think that's been part of the thought process I've gone through. Is also being that demonstrating to my daughters. I've got 2 daughters and a son. I'm really demonstrating to them that you can actually take on these leadership roles and you can do both. Yes, it's a challenge at times. I'm very lucky. I have a very supportive husband who takes the main caring responsibility in our household, and he's been very supportive of my career. But yeah, it's certainly a challenge to balance all that, and you have to kind of compromise a lot of the time. And I think that's something, as a family, we've really learned to do. I couldn't do what I do without their support, and I'm really grateful for that. But it's a real honour and privilege to be in this kind of in this leadership role. So, yeah.
Very interesting. Ambassador Kazaure, now let me also bring you in. As I said earlier in my introduction, at a time, when you were in your career, you earned double promotion. First, of course, 3rd secretary, then 2nd secretary, then 3rd secretary. What does this mean in diplomatic service? Give us an understanding. Let's get to know what it entails, really.
Yeah. Thank you, Claire. Let me give you a little history. When we joined the service, together with my colleagues in 1993, we were a little bit in one place for some time. It took us almost 6 years without single promotion because there is administrative issues, not because of the staff, but the system generally. Fortunately for us, for me, I was posted on attachment after spending more than 6 years at headquarters, which is not normal. I was posted to Harare, Zimbabwe, on attachment. What is 1 year program, but later they converted to a full post. Unfortunately, we could not finish. After 2 years, they called us back. But within that 2 years, the ministry decided, in collaboration with the Federal Civil Service Commission, to review our case and see those who qualified to be promoted and adjusted to the level that they are supposed to be. And I'm among the...
One of those. Yes, what basically is the gap in responsibilities? That's actually what I'm after. I'm talking about between a first, a third, and a second secretary in the diplomatic service.
Yes.
Yes. What was the schedule of responsibilities?
Yes. The schedule of responsibilities depend on the High Commissioner you are working with.
Okay.
Each mission, they have their own schedule of duties. Okay. So as a third secretary, second secretary, first secretary, is depend on the ambassador. Luckily enough for me, my ambassador discovered that as a young officer, I'm among the youngest officer in our set. And I'm not proud to say that I took my job
seriously.
And all my head of missions that I serve with, they identify that quality with me. I work hard. I don't have closing time. I work 24 hours, serve 24 hours. I'm always at the airport to assist Nigerians in one way or the other.
Okay. Okay, I want you to, finish your line of thought before I bring in Claire.
Yes. So I think my head of missions, all of them, the one I serve under them, they notice that this officer deserves serious responsibilities. I could remember the responsibility given to me. Some of my senior colleagues were not given that opportunity because I take my job seriously.
Okay, let me leave that for the moment and come back to the nitty-gritty of our conversation. Let's go slowly and logically. In one of your comments, Claire, that I had to dig up on building successful partnerships, you did say that the first thing to do was mutual understanding.
Yeah.
So before you set out for this mission, what mental picture did you have of Nigeria? And for the period that you've been here, has anything changed?
Oh, that's a very good question. I'm very passionate about working partnership together. I think so often we use the word partnership and we're not genuine about it. And that's where I think that came from, that real belief from my experience, 25 years now in the kind of international development and work in this area, that you really need to understand each other. So when I got the job, I was very privileged already to have spent my first half of my career working in Africa. So for the first 15 years, I lived and worked in Nairobi, in Kampala, Pretoria. So I felt I had a little understanding on Africa. But I knew I really had to understand what the context was here. So I did a lot of background reading, tried to kind of talk to people I knew who had lived in Nigeria. I started to read up journals and news articles on Nigeria. But I don't think anything really prepares you until you get here. When I arrived in country, I mean, the reality is Nigeria gets a bad press around the world. It's tough for the High Commission myself. I think we have to deal with that day to day. That people have these preconceptions about Nigeria. When you get here, it's so different. It's such a welcoming society. I find working with Nigerians so kind of so interesting. There's a really dynamic kind of approach, very kind of engaged, and really a lot of strength and focus. So when I came here, all my reading was kind of like, okay, I've got this basic understanding, but actually the reality is very different. And so now I've really taken the time to try and build up friendships with Nigerians here, particularly in Abuja, but also down in Lagos, where we have an honorary consul officer. I haven't had much time to travel around the country yet because I only arrived here in August. But I think that would be very much my next kind of approach to deepen my understanding, is to actually see the different parts of the country and the different kind of aspects of Nigeria. Hopefully then, when I've got that better understanding of the Nigeria, and through my colleague, particularly in Canberra, I'm getting a very good understanding.
You've just said, talked about the kind of, attention that Nigeria gets outside the country.
Yeah.
Do you think the literatures, that are available to the public is doing justice to it? So what do you think?
It's really interesting. So I think from a literature kind of perspective, I mean, Nigeria has phenomenal writers out there who are just the world leaders in writing. You've got phenomenal, we were just talking about the music industry too. You've got phenomenal artists, you've got phenomenal writers, and the Nollywood industry. It's from that side, it's really strong and positive. But unfortunately, in the press, there's a lot of negativity around sort of fraud, around scams and things like that. And I think the two are juxtaposed together, and it can be very difficult for a person from the outside to sort of see how the two kind of fit together. I think when you get here and you realise it's a huge population of 200 million people, that those incidences you hear of the negativity are a small part of the kind of what is actually the reality on the ground. And when you get here and you see the kind of the broader kind of dynamic kind of community in which you're living and working, and you see the Nollywood industry, and you see the kind of the writers and the musicians, and you really get to see that much more dynamic kind of Nigeria, which I don't think we always see from the outside.
All right, Ambassador, so how well do you have been in Australia for quite some time, so how well do you think Australians know Nigeria in terms of capacity and human resource rich?
This is my
responsibility.
My responsibility as a High Commissioner. Immediately I assumed duty in Australia. I noticed it's a country where they appreciate Nigerians. Because they have the policy that before you get their visas, they will make sure that you qualify to travel to their country. So all the Nigerians resident in Australia are skilled migrants, educated, and the responsible Nigerians. This is my 5th mission. I can say this is the 2nd mission that I have a rest of mine. I don't have much consular problems. Nigerians behave very well. They respect the law of the land. And from the High Commission, we always advise them that try to obey the law of the land. And they are professionals. We have lecturers. We have medical doctors. Nigerians, in large numbers. We have nurses. We have traders. We have those who are working in the government institution in Australia.
What's the population like?
The population of Nigerians within Australia is more than 14,000 Nigerians. Now,
legitimately employed.
Legitimately employed, and doing legitimate businesses. and making Nigeria proud. Let me give you an example. There are so many institutions. Let me take medicals. Nigerian doctors, they are among the best doctors in Australia. My colleagues will agree with me. I have a Nigerian in Canberra now. He's among the best gynecologists in Canberra. He has his own clinic in Sydney, but the government of Australia noticed his capability and the ability. They give him the offer to move to Canberra, take their schedule. There are so many. I was in Perth City. I was made to understand we have more than 150 medical doctors
of Nigerian origin,
doing excellent job. So Nigerians, they are really appreciated.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Now let's look at about trade relationship. We said, of course, that Australia and Nigeria have been in this relationship for 60 years, thereabout. And that relationship has been anchored on, trade, trading commodities. Okay, let's look at that. It says that the trade balance has been fluctuating.
Yeah.
I want to read out some figures. It says that 2018, out of a total trade merchandise of more than 700 million Australian dollars, exports account for 143 million Australian dollars, and of course, which puts that number to 55, and imports to Nigeria stands at 587 or 48. Yes, and Ambassador, of course, you know where I got the statistics from.
Yeah.
So, again, is Australia a principal import resource for Nigeria, Ambassador?
I think, despite the distance between Nigeria and Australia, we have a business linkage, even though it's not up to the standard we can see. But working with Ambassador Claire and her predecessor, Ambassador Ford, we make effort to see how we can improve our economic relations. Australians, we have a lot of things to learn from them economically. They are very good in agriculture, very good in mining, education, very good. So a lot of the opportunities, I personally am working to see we bring more investment to Nigeria.
We're going to get to that.
Yes.
What I'm trying to find out from you is the areas, of cooperation in terms of trade balance, apart from crude oil. Which other areas, is Nigeria relating with Australia in terms of exports and import? I know Australia imports crude oil from us.
Exactly.
Yes, while, they send to us, we import, basically I know of wheat and other, items. So, but again, Claire, service exports is also put at 148.30.
Yeah, do you know what
and of course, these figures are obtained from the fact sheet of the Australian government and Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So this is in favor of Australia.
Yeah, it is.
Not Nigeria. So how would you evaluate, servicing of these trade relations for the past 60 years from both countries?
I think it goes back to that earlier question around understanding each other. And I think, High Commissioner Bello highlighted the distance can be kind of challenging because it seemed to be a country that's further away from each other, that people don't necessarily understand each other. In any business transaction, you need to have partnerships and relationships understand each other. I think that's what we're both working on to try and improve that understanding. It's where that question came from earlier on. It's not as high as I want it to be right now. And I think there is potential to increase the trade relationship between the two countries, particularly on investment coming into Nigeria. I mean, the High Commissioner held an investment forum in Melbourne last week to try and attract the Australian business, and there was definitely a lot of interest. There's a couple of sectors that we really focus on. So at the moment, when people ask me about the trade relationship, I categorise it very much as it's a modest but focused relationship. So at the moment, mining and education are our two areas of real focus. But I think we recognise there's a lot of potential. That potential is not being realised at the moment, but it is there. So that figure you came up with a minute ago in terms of the services, 143, that's education. So that's our... It's a funny figure in a sense that it's we put it under our trade figures, but it is Nigerians going to Australia to study. We have 6 of the 100 best universities in the world, and Nigerians are recognising that. Yes, that often people go to the UK or America, but increasingly they're seeing that Australia is one of the top leaders in terms of universities. So that figure for us is from the education. That's how much we make from Nigerians coming to study in Australia. Yeah.
Okay, Claire, let me pause us for a while and go on a very short break. So when we come back, we now look at this new narrative that both of you are pushing in terms of widening our trade relationship. You're watching Late Edition, and this week we're looking at how Nigeria and Australia are pushing forward their relationship that has spanned over half a century and a decade. We'll be right back.
This is NTA News 24 broadcasting from Abuja. You can watch us anywhere, anytime on the following platforms.
Start Times, Channel 101, Freak TV, Channel 703, GSTV, Channel 419, and Go TV, Channel 46.
For more information, log on to our website, www.nta.ng, or join us on our social media handles, Twitter at NTA News 24, Facebook at NTA News 24.
For comments, suggestions and inquiries, send an email to news24@nta.gov.ng or call us on the following numbers.
NTA News 24,
News and more news.
All right, welcome back. And my guest, just as a point of reminder, I have Her Excellency Ambassador Claire Ireland, who is the Australian High Commissioner to Nigeria. And I also have my guest, His Excellency Ambassador Bello Husseini Kazauri, Nigerian High Commissioner to Australia. Thank you, Your Excellencies, for being my guest on Late Edition this week. This part of the program, we're going to speed up our responses because we almost have done. Let us look at, I said earlier on that Australia is a strong pusher for multilateralism.
Yes.
And that's, of course,
I'm glad you picked up on that. I think that's what we have really in common.
Precisely. So I want you to tell us how Australia is supporting Nigeria, both at the multilateral level and at the bilateral level to address insecurity in the Northeast.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question, because I think often we look at the trade relationship and say, yeah, it's not a huge in terms of the money yet, and that's something we said we want to increase. Multilaterally, we are really engaged with each other, and I think there's lots of different levels to this. So to go directly to your question first, I mean, in terms of what we're doing to support in the Northeast. So Australia doesn't have a bilateral aid program here. What we do is put our aid resources through the multilaterals. So through our kind of contributions to the UN, to the World Bank, to the World Food Programme, for example, that's how Australian financing gets to the places like the Northeast. So in particular, we gave financing to the World Food Programme for the drought up there a couple of years ago. And so that's through our humanitarian programme where we ensure the money goes direct to those multilateral institutions and then it comes to Nigeria. We think that's much more efficient because if we had another bilateral aid programme with all the other donors, it would just add complication to already very kind of engaged
But
sector.
are you seeing outcomes?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we really trust, we're strong multilateralists. We really trust the UN, the World Bank to deliver on these programs. And I think we're fully behind that. I work very closely with the head of the UNDP and with World Bank as well to ensure that our financing is effectively spent. Tonight I've got a reception. I'm catching up with the regional director for the World Food Programme, for example, and that'll be the questions I'll be asking him, how the financing is actually being spent on the ground and what are the results? How can you see the numbers kind of come down? So yeah, I think it's a good relationship on that side.
Okay, Your Excellency Ambassador Kezaure, you're championing this new narrative as, of course, a Nigeria High Commissioner to Australia. And as you said, last year you held a roadwalk in Melbourne to demonstrate your commitment. Tell us quickly about this roadwalk and what was the outcome?
Yes. It's not last year. It's in 2018.
Okay.
The Nigerian High Commission, in collaboration with NACIMA, NIFC, we organized what we call 2018 Mining Roadshow. And we decided to see where do we benefit more in our economic relations with Australia. So we look at which area Australia has comparative advantage. I identify my miners because Australia, they excel in mining. That is why we organize a mining roadshow in 2 cities. One in Perth. Immediately we finished, we moved to Perth because we identified these 2 cities because of simple reason that Perth is a mining city. I wish you visit Perth and see what mining can do to a country.
Okay, so this narrative now
Yes.
is looking towards mining.
Mining. Yes.
Of course, which you say Australia has comparative advantage. So what kind of investment does Australia intend in this sector? Human resource, finance, technical, or all of the above? And what is the potential market value you intend to bring in?
So it could be all of the above. So let me just give you just a facts and figures. So in Australia, in Nigeria, it's not very much at the moment. In West Africa, Australian investment in West Africa is 10 billion Australian dollars. You look at the whole of Africa, it's 30 billion Australian dollars. There is no shortage of Australian private sector mining companies who are keen and interested to invest in the development of the mining sector here in Africa. Challenge in Nigeria is that the mining sector is not nearly as advanced as the other sectors. And I think that really comes back to the president's kind of narrative and his focus on diversifying the economy, recognizing that so far the oil industry has dominated in the economy, and there's a very clear direction now to diversify, and mining is one of those, and we stand, Australia, hand in hand, ready to work with the Ministry of Mines and Steel Development in that. It's worth noting, though, that we've already been engaged for a long time with the Nigerian government on this. Back in 2003, when you had CHOGM here, so the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, my Prime Minister came over at the time and met with your President, and they had a very good relationship. And from that point, the President here invited Australia to really work closely with the Ministry of Mines and Steel Development to develop the mining legislation. What you see in 2007 and 2008 was the mining legislation that got developed in Nigeria is very much based on the Western Australian mining legislation, which the High Commissioner was just talking about in terms of Perth. That's in West Australia. So we've got the good mining legislation, or you have very good mining legislation in place now here, and the Cadastral Office is working very hard to put all the geological information and data online. Once that is online, that then becomes the platform for the Australian, or not just Australian, any kind of private sector, mining sector company to have the information to start to make those investments. So it's, you've gone down a process, we're getting there. there's 2 Australian stock exchange listed companies who are already active here in Nigeria. I think once they've got their community development plans in place and they're now looking to move to the next stage to actually move into sort of the physical mining, then you will see the large-scale investments come along. I was with the Minister for Mines and Steel Development in Cape Town last week at Mining in Durban. One of the things we talked about is once Nigeria has a successful kind of mining project, and at the moment there's a Canadian company called Thor who are working on a gold mining project. Once that has a success here in Nigeria, then the rest of the international companies will see that you can do business here and you can do business well. And so my kind of real focus with the mining minister is whether it's Australian or Canadian or whoever, to get an internationally recognised mining company active on the ground is going to have a fantastic roadmap for the rest of the investment going forward.
Okay, you ticked off something very important. Okay. That is having, the right legislative framework to drive mining. Ambassador Kazaure, I'm sure you know that this is a huge revenue spinner for Nigeria, which can also reverse our budget deficit if properly but professionally managed. But it could also present with tremendous, extraordinary security, health, environment challenges. Yes. Let's, take our cue or take the Niger Delta, as a case in point. So what I want to know from you is, do we have a partnership model or package that will involve the host communities of, the mining areas? Yeah. So as to avoid the conflicts or confusion that, is common in the Niger Delta.
Yeah. I wish we would go to the roadmap document, minor roadmap of Nigeria. These are some of the issues that the federal government think that we have to bring the community involved in before any mining company or investors trying to go to any community. The community will accept it as their own. Let me give you an example. When nickel is discovered in Kaduna by Comet Industry in Lagos, in Australia, they discovered that they cannot go to a community without their consent. So the traditional rulers, the local communities were all encouraged to join hand and support the company. And we from the government, we encourage the investors to come close to the community and assist them. There's social responsibilities.
When you talk about encouragement,
yes,
this is not verbal encouragement.
Yes,
there must be a framework.
Yes. Yes.
There's legal framework.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is, sorry.
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm so passionate about this. So, Claire, your question is absolutely right. And I guess this is where I'm biased and where I feel Australia is a very good partner, and that's why we're working very closely. Because Australia has the highest standards in terms of environmental due diligence, in terms of community-based engagement.
This is your area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but because we have the highest standards, that's why I'm keen to encourage the Australian investment here in partnership, as you said. The legislation is really good that you have here. So there is legislation which requires community development action plans to be agreed ahead of government. So you have that here in the legislation. And I think that's very much in part what I learned from the 2003 when the President and Prime Minister were working together, was that was the kind of what they wanted to see, the grounding in place. What we've done over the last number of years as well is through our Australia Awards programme, we've supported a number of Nigerians to go and study in Australia, particularly in the mining sector. So we've been doing a lot of capacity building between the two countries around the mining sector, both in terms of the legislation, in terms of community development planning, in terms of environmental legislation. So that's why I'm a real advocate that Australia is a good partner for Nigeria on this, because the world recognises Australia as leaders in this in terms of good community and good environmental management. And that's why I think if we can get an Australian company to succeed here, it will really set the tone for the rest of the world that Nigeria has high standards, it's environmental due diligence in place, and communities matter. Sorry.
Okay, you wanted to say something, otherwise I will just go on to my next question, which of course, my next question borders on another area of cooperation, which both of you have been highlighting, and that's of course education and agriculture. I heard in one of your interviews, you talk about, also looking into cooperation in that area. So what is Australia offering Nigeria in the education sector?
In the education sector, so that's something, again, I'm quite passionate about. So over the last 10 years, we've supported 400 Nigerian students to study in Australia through something we call the Australia Awards Programme. So that's financed through our aid programme, and it's direct funding to...
From what level to what level?
It focuses on master's studies, yeah.
And PhD.
It used to be PhD, but now we've just focused on masters because of the quicker wins that you can get for an individual to go for 1 year and then come back to their country. So that's part of the requirement under our scholarship program, that you go to Australia, but you have to come back and bring that knowledge back to the country.
Are there specific areas of, course areas, or is open?
So it's been open, but what I'm trying to do under my tenure is to focus it a little bit more, to focus it on where there is that comparative advantage. So for us now, mining sector is a real priority, agriculture sector and health sector. So those are the three sectors, rather than just have students across the board, to say, look, where can we really support Nigeria that it wants to go? And that diversification of the economy and the mining sector being a priority will let us stand ready to support that in terms of our scholarship program. But it's not just scholarships, right? Yet we have 400 that we've financed over the last 10 years. When I talked about that trade figure that we have, you have almost 3,000 Nigerians self-financing and going to Australia to study. That recognition of, like I said earlier on, that 6 of the 100 top universities in the world are Australian. So now you're kind of Nigerians really recognising the value of the Australian education. If you go to study in Australia, not only do you get an exemplary Australian education, you get your gateway into the Asia Pacific, because 30% of our...
We don't just want to... I will take this last question from you briefly, because we have to take our news at 5. So beyond going to Australia and getting educated in Australia, she just said that 6 of Australian tertiary institutions are ranked among the 100 best. Yes. So apart from that, what other area, is Nigeria seeking partnership, or do we intend to seek partnership in the education sector with Australia?
Yes.
We have our universities here that are also, needing attention, technical and, other expertise.
Yes. Right away now, I'm working very hard to see that we have exchange program with some of the universities. Before I left Canberra, I went to University of Canberra. A university from a number of states need collaboration, and we are working very hard to see how we can link them together so that we will learn from them. We intend to bring Australians to come here to study for a few courses, and also to take our Nigerians. And there's a lot to learn.
You know China, sorry to bring in here.
Yes.
China has a program, of course, that encourages cultural, exchange.
Yes, that is what I'm trying to point out. That's what we are trying to do. Through these students, the cultural exchange will be developed, because at the end of the day, these so-called students, they travel to each other country. They will become part of the system.
But in China, you have an institution that even teaches one of our local languages in China.
It's impressive.
Yes.
Okay. No, luckily enough for us in Australia,
that is
they
a good
speak
way
English.
To integrate.
Yes, Australia speak English, and we are also speaking. But by and large, we are encouraging cultural exchange between the universities.
I think just adding on to what you're saying, I think what in partnership we've also been trying to do is get that stronger partnership between the universities. So I know Monash University, for example, is coming out here in the next month to kind of partner up with the universities in Nigeria. So I think you're right. We don't just want people to go over to Australia to study, but we want those relationships to come here and the Australian universities to have those partnerships in country.
All right. Ambassador Kazaure, let's look at the bilateral talks, the high-level bilateral talks, between Nigeria and Australia. Talk to us about that, and where do we go from there?
Yeah. The bilateral talks between Australia and Nigeria It's a platform where the two countries will sit down and talk to each other for mutual benefits. I can remember it was inaugurated in 2011 while the Permanent Secretary Minister of Foreign Affairs then traveled to Australia. We signed an MOU to have these senior official talks at the level of the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria and Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia.
That's the Nigeria-Australia Cooperation, no?
No.
Okay.
It's we call it senior official talks.
Okay.
Yes. It's at the level of the Permanent Secretary. Okay. And it is designed for 2 years. So in 2013, we held another one, the same in Canberra. So since then, we didn't have the opportunity because of the change of policy in the ministry. So now we managed to bring our brothers and sisters from Canberra to come to Abuja. It was held yesterday, and it's a very fruitful discussion.
Yesterday being when? When exactly?
Yes, from morning.
No, you said yesterday.
Yesterday, that is 10th February 2020 at Transcorp Hilton. Dr. Angela, First Assistant Secretary in DPAT, led the Australian delegation. Well,
so what's the content?
Yes,
with regards to strengthening our relationship.
Yes, like what I'm trying to say, it's a platform where the two countries will sit down and discuss issues of mutual interest, which involve political, economic, socio-cultural, education, and any other field.
So what has been the input of the High Commission, so both countries?
Yes. Of course, without the High Commission, this thing will not go to hold. I know the efforts my High Commission make to make this a reality. And I cannot do it alone without the Australian High Commission in Abuja. So we work hand in hand with them to agree on the areas of bilateral relationships to be discussed. Areas of irritants, if there's any, because just a way to improve our relationships. And it's a very fruitful discussions.
Okay. Yeah. Your Excellency, this is my last question to Claire. And I just want to read this out. In terms of demographics and resources, Nigeria, of course, presents a huge market, not just to Africa, but to the world. But on their own, they do not spur increased, investments. Of course, you need enabling policies and environment. So recently, our president, endorsed or signed into law the Finance Act, of course, which promotes inclusiveness in terms of gives business investment, some laxity in terms of tax incentives and all that, and of course widens the scope. So, from your perspective, do you have any suggestion on how we might raise the bar in this area? For instance, what changes, do you envisage, that Nigeria can effect, for ease of doing business? Really?
Yeah, no, it's important to note that in terms of ease of doing business, and the World Bank has actually raised Nigeria up 15 places in the world of ease of doing business ranking they do each year. Nigeria's really made some really significant steps and improved it. What I know best is the mining sector, and the incentives in the mining sector are very good now. The big challenge comes from our earlier conversation around Australian business having not been very kind of busy or active on the ground so far. And so it's about that understanding of how to do business here. So I think from what I've seen, the enabling environment has improved significantly in Nigeria. It's now about building up that understanding between the two cultures and the relationship for the confidence in the Australian business actually to do business here in country. So certainly in the mining sector, it's good. I mean, you can't fault it in terms of some of the tax incentives.
So where do we go from here?
So I think we continue doing what we're doing already in terms of the High Commission myself. So in September each year, we have something called the Australia-Africa Week. And that's where we bring kind of Africans over to Australia to help better understand the Australian sectors like education and mining. And there's something called Africa Down Under. And the Ministry for Mines and Steel Development will be invited to that. And there we will take them out to meet prospective investors. They'll take them to the mines and show them what an actual mine looks like. We'll take them to some of our indigenous communities to see what, how those community development agreements work. So I think we've got the foundations in place. Our roles now are very much to continue to build that relationship, to hold the private sector hand to some degree and build those relationships between the countries and really expose each other to what the opportunities are.
Final word from Your Excellency,
Yes.
quickly.
Yeah. I want to just inform the public that all what we are doing, we got the encouragement from Mr. President of Nigeria, I personally. He encouraged us to make sure we bring investors to this country. And luckily enough, for me, I'm in a country where we will benefit. And we are working very hard. In the near future, Nigerians will smile.
Thank you, Your Excellency Ambassador Bello Husseini Kazaure, Nigeria High Commissioner to Australia, and Your Excellency Ambassador Claire, my namesake, Ireland, Australian High Commissioner to Nigeria. Thank you both of you for joining me on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Right, that's it this week on Late Edition. I hope you enjoyed the program. Don't forget you can watch other editions on YouTube. And from me and the rest of my production team, bye-bye.